Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
We're diving into a world where the line between, information and an actual weapon
Yeah.
has pretty much vanished.
It's completely collapsed.
The sources we've lined up for you are all arguing the same thing. In this information age, controlling the narrative isn't just about, say, winning a debate.
No, not at all. It's become the primary tool of warfare.
And the premise is so simple and so sobering. He who controls the information controls the world.
And that really is the core of this deep dive. Our mission here is to trace how this information management has evolved.
Right.
Because governments keeping secrets, that's not new.
Yeah.
We've always had classic national security cover-ups.
Of course.
The real danger, and what we have to understand, is the shift. The shift from just hiding things to, well, strategic, legally sanctioned deception, using AI, using surveillance.
To, as the source says, deceive more prudently and strategically.
Exactly. The scale, the legality, that's what's new.
And that progression is everything. To really get a handle on the deception happening now, we have to start at the beginning, with the old school cover-ups.
The conventional stuff.
Yeah, the things done in the name of national security that really laid the groundwork for all the public distrust we see today.
And what's fascinating here is the pattern you see. It's always the military or an institution prioritizing its own reputation over transparency, even when facing, a near total disaster.
That's the foundation.
That's the foundation of distrust long before the digital age.
So let's start with an example. 1969, the USS Enterprise, the world's first nuclear aircraft carrier.
Right.
It's packed with Tomcat fighters, and a missile explodes on deck. The research is clear because this was a nuclear vessel. This could have been a massive nuclear disaster.
An environmental catastrophe at the very least.
And the military's response: suppress the scale of it, manage the news, the source has a great term for it, the trickle truth method.
And this pattern just repeats itself all through the nuclear era. It shows you how skilled they already were at massive information suppression. Take the Goldsboro B-52 crash, 1961.
In North Carolina.
In North Carolina. A B-52 bomber carrying 2 nuclear bombs literally breaks apart in midair.
And here's the detail that it's chilling. It was kept classified until 2013.
50 years.
Over 50 years later, we find out that the official military report said those bombs were, and I'm quoting here, one safety switch away from detonation.
Quite about that.
An entire U.S. state was minutes away from an accidental nuclear catastrophe, and the #1 priority was secrecy. Not public safety, but secrecy.
And it wasn't a one-off, not even close. 1966, you have the Palomares crash over Spain.
Another B-52, this time during a mid-air refueling.
The bomber breaks up, drops 4 hydrogen bombs. The crew of the tanker was killed. It was a complete disaster.
And 3 of those H-bombs, they didn't detonate, but they broke open. They contaminated about 2 square kilometers with plutonium.
Right next to a small Spanish fishing village.
And again, the U.S. military just aggressively suppressed all the details.
A little pop culture connection here for you.
Oh, yeah.
The 4th bomb fell into the ocean. The hunt for it, with the Soviets also looking, apparently inspired some of the story for the movie Men of Honor.
So even when it becomes a movie, the full truth isn't there.
Never. And it just keeps going. The source reminds us of another one in 2007. A B-52 flew clear across the U.S., from North Dakota to Louisiana, with 6 live nuclear warheads on board by mistake.
And that was kept quiet, too.
Of course it was.
So when you look at the frequency of these near disasters and the consistent, just decades-long pattern of suppression, the real insight isn't just that they kept secrets. It's that the institutional reflex to control the narrative to protect itself was already perfected. It was established for generations.
And that sets the stage for everything that follows.
Exactly.
That's the pivot point. Once you have that foundation of distrust, the strategy has to evolve. It's no longer enough to just suppress physical secrets.
Now you have to actively control the public narrative itself.
Which brings us to the co-opting of the media.
And this starts way earlier than I think people realize. Right after World War II.
Almost immediately.
The research we looked at suggests the OSS, the Office of Strategic Services, which, was the direct forerunner to the CIA.
The precursor, yeah.
They began a systematic campaign to embed their agents into major U.S. news outlets, newspapers, radio, and very quickly, Hollywood.
And our notes draw a pretty direct line here. In that post-war world, news offices were seen as, well, strategic assets. The source claims that most of them basically had an assigned CIA operative,
A gatekeeper.
an unofficial gatekeeper, absolutely, making sure the news that reached the American public was, let's say, reviewed and authorized.
The source material actually brings up the movie Argo as a perfect example of this cozy relationship.
The Iran hostage rescue, right?
Yeah, and it underscores how the intelligence community is still deeply invested in Hollywood and, maybe more importantly now, social media.
And the tactics today are so much more fluid. It's not about having an agent in an editor's office anymore.
No.
Why control a newspaper headline when you can target demographics directly through channels they already trust?
Influencers.
Influencers. For instance, the source references recent allegations that the former Biden administration was paying social media personalities, and it even specifies adult film stars, to push certain political narratives to younger people.
And it's not just a U.S. thing. The research also cites claims that the Israeli government does something similar, paying up to $7,000 a post for this kind of narrative pushing.
So you see the shift. It's profound. The goal isn't just keeping secrets out of the news.
It's about actively inserting your narrative into the news stream.
And that whole movement, from passive secrecy to active narrative injection,
Yeah.
it all leads to the most critical change our sources discuss.
The legalization of it all.
The legalization of information warfare against your own people.
This is where we really have to slow down, because the change in the law here it's dramatic. For decades, the one thing protecting Americans from their own government psychological operations was the Smith-Munn Act of 1948.
The anti-propaganda law.
The original one.
Right. It essentially built a firewall. It prevented the U.S. government from taking the programming and psyops that was aiming at foreign audiences and turning it inward on its own citizens.
A crucial firewall.
It was.
But then, 2013.
The turning point. The National Defense Authorization Act, the NDAA, the sources are very clear on this.
An amendment gets slipped in.
An amendment gets slipped in that essentially repeals those core protections. It guts the Smith-Munn Act.
So if the law now allows the government to use these tools on its own citizens, what? What are we talking about here? What are these information operations, or I.O.?
Well, the official rationale for the change shifted. It went from being about, say, Gulf War operations to something much closer to home.
Domestic terrorism.
Domestic terrorism. That was the justification. That the military's I.O. units needed to centralize communications against civilians inside the U.S.
And here's where it gets really interesting. Because information operations isn't some vague term. It's a defined military strategy.
It is. The goal is what the military calls full-spectrum dominance.
Which sounds like...
It is what it sounds like. The research describes it as a near-total government takeover of the information space, meant to influence everyone inside it. We have to break down the components.
Okay.
Because when you hear the acronyms, you move from abstract theory to very concrete, very real strategies. I.O. integrates 5 key capabilities.
First up is electronic warfare, or EW. So this is targeting the electromagnetic spectrum, jamming communications, signals intelligence, that kind of thing.
Then you have computer network operations, CNO. And this isn't just your IT department. This is offensive cyber ops.
Like what?
Creating digital identities, mass data collection, deploying bots and automated systems to amplify or silence certain voices online.
Third, and this seems like the most critical one for this discussion, psychological operations, PSYOP.
And this is active behavior modification. It's not just about spreading information. It's about designing campaigns to literally change the attitudes and behaviors of a target audience. It's about influencing opinion on a mass scale.
Okay, what's fourth?
Fourth is military deception, milides. This is the deliberate act of misleading your adversary's decision makers. In a domestic context, that could mean creating false narratives or leaking misleading info to steer public debate.
And finally, Operation Security, or OPSE. Basically protecting your own secrets while you're doing all this other stuff.
And the stated purpose of combining all 5 of those is very precise. It is to, quote, influence, disrupt, corrupt, or usurp adversarial human and automated decision-making.
And these were the tools used on foreign audiences through things like Radio Free Europe.
Historically, yes. But since 2013, the U.S. government is now legally permitted to deploy these exact same military tactics on its own citizens.
Which leads us to the perceived results of this change.
Huh.
The source actually calls it managed psychosis.
A strong term.
A very strong term. The research asserts that the White House, State Department, the Pentagon, they can now go beyond just twisting the arm of mainstream media.
They can go direct.
Directly disseminate misinformation, disinformation to influence public opinion on anything. Elections, public policy. you name it.
And this is where we have to report on the very charged conclusions that the source material draws from this, impartially. The source argues that this legalization of IO was applied almost immediately to major crises.
It points to the COVID event as a case study. It asserts, and again, this is from the source, that the pandemic was a propaganda partnership and a military PSYOP managed from the White House.
The source claims it was orchestrated by a U.S. government agency, and it even cites a statement from former Secretary of State Pompeo, who allegedly called the event a live and military one.
And this is all used to prop up the author's larger argument that the public media, the so-called Fourth Estate,
The watchdog.
the watchdog, is gone. It's been, in the author's words, bought out by political and powerful interests, making any and all official information suspect.
And because of this perceived total collapse of trustworthy information.
The author says you, the listener, need to have an extreme vetting filter. The argument is that since it is the age of deception, every single piece of official information has to be met with intense scrutiny.
To really drive home the scale of this perceived breakdown in social order, the source uses very, very strong language. The author says the world is given over to a perverse and reprobate mind, and then includes an unattributed quote to back this up.
And we have to report this controversial quote directly from the source material. It says, "We live in a world where homosexuals lecture us on morals, transvestites lecture us on human biology, babbly killers lecture us on human rights, and socialists lecture us on economics."
So this is presented by the source as sort of evidence, proof of a world turned upside down that requires this extreme level of personal vetting.
Right.
And after that severe moral critique, the source proposes a very specific and religious solution for how to navigate this world.
What's the solution?
It asserts that for believers and followers of Jesus, the Holy Spirit itself acts as the light and the truth.
The ultimate filter.
The ultimate filter. Something, the source argues, that the average person simply doesn't have access to.
So if we pull all of this together,
Yeah.
what's the takeaway from this deep dive?
Wow.
We've traced this evolution, right? It started with keeping quiet about big physical secrets, like nuclear accidents. That created a baseline of institutional distrust.
Which then evolved into something more active, managing perception through media agents and now digital influencers.
And then the final, crucial step.
Yeah.
The legal one. Overturning the Smith-Mundt Act in 2013.
And that's what allowed military-grade psychological operations IO with all its parts, PSYOP, CNO, MailDeck, to be legally used on the domestic public.
It moved information control from a foreign strategy to an internal systemic one. The key takeaway for you, listening to this, is to recognize that these terms information operations, PSYOP, they aren't just jargon. They are specific, centralized military strategies. And the law in the U.S. shifted to allow them to be used here at home.
Which fundamentally changes the job of being a citizen.
How so?
Well, think about it. If the explicit goal of information operations is to influence, disrupt, corrupt, or usurp adversarial human and automated decision-making, and those tools are now deployed domestically, what does that imply about the role of critical thinking in your own life?
It means everything has to be questioned.
Are you watching the news as a reflection of reality or as an actively orchestrated campaign? And how can you possibly tell the difference when the law itself permits mass deception? That, I think, is the question we're all left with in this age of deception.